thinking about different ways that we can actually manage and handle this within our own families and for ourselves rather than going straight to medicate things ultimately. And while I'm not against medication at all, I think it can be really helpful and necessary sometimes, but also to have this alongside it or prior to that prescription. So these are the symptoms that come in whenever I'm treating people who are struggling with stress and anxiety. So I'm curious, just look through that. Potentially there will be people on this call who connect with all of these things, but these are the main ones: sleeping problems, appetite, either going one way where you're not hungry anymore, you used to be a good eater and not anymore, or you're going through emotional eating phases, you insatiable appetite where you just can't ground yourself with food. Food's not enough. Concentration, irritability, overwhelm is usually what I see. So people come in and the second we talk about, so how's your emotional health been? It's just like, oh, the floodgates open, which is so natural and healthy that our body is just almost like so tightly wound up, it needs a good cry and a safe space. Catastrophizing, I think, is really interesting whenever our brain, our body, and our nervous system is in fight or flight so often or constantly that everything feels threatening. Even sounds. So if you are someone who gets like jump scared very easily, that's usually a good sign that you might be in fight or flight a little bit too much. Stress and anxiety might be a thing there. Digestive issues, we're going to get more into that later. Skin flares. So if your child is all of a sudden has got these eczema patches or psoriasis is starting to come in through, it's always important to look at different types of stress, possibly anxiety in kids and adults as well. Thoughts are racing and you can't switch off. I feel like that's most of us a lot of the time. Unable to enjoy yourself or relax. I did a post on that a few days ago or weeks ago, and yeah, a lot of people give me really interesting feedback about that. This inability to like lose the guilt when it comes to doing nothing or enjoying yourself. Feeling depressed, so low moods. Difficult to lose weight. There's a big cortisol piece in that, hormonal imbalance, and feeling uninterested in life. So that joy and lack of joy spectrum, we're going to talk about that more. I should mention, if anybody feels that they want to drop some feedback in, please use the chat. I'd love to hear it, and I'll be looking at the chat at the end for Q&A things. Also, if you want to take pictures or screenshot things from memory, take pictures away. I'm also going to be sharing this recording, so people who couldn't make it tonight will also be able to watch this. So with stress and anxiety, I notice in myself, but also people that I treat, that very often we don't know that we're stressed or that we're anxious. I think that our body has a really good way of protecting our brain from knowing just how much stress it's under, which is great because then we can cope. But very often, because we're not aware of how stressed we are, we push ourselves to the absolute limit. And then things like digestion shuts down, or sleep shuts down, or chronic sickness comes in. So it's great, but it's also, we need to be very, very aware. Does something just feel off? Maybe you're not sure why. Maybe you don't know where to start, which is so understandable because there is so much advice online now. It's really hard to know. Do you start with the matcha tea, or do you start with the magnesium, or do you start with the sunlight or the fasting? And it's like, yeah, very overwhelming a lot of the time. And feeling on edge constantly is a good sign. I will say on this one, I didn't include this, but I thought it was important to talk about. There is a good book called The Anatomy of Anxiety, by an author, Ellen Vora, I think her name is. And she talks about this idea of false anxiety and true anxiety. And I like to use that whenever I'm talking to clients in session about anxiousness. And in a nutshell, which is what we're going to talk about now, false anxiety is a feeling of anxiousness that might not be grounded in a real, um, no, that's not the best way to explain it. Sorry. False anxiety to me is whenever our like our bodies are giving us anxious feedback. Whereas true anxiety she talks about is when basically we're being told that something is not right, whether it's job, family, relationship. There's like a gut instinct there that we need to move on to a different path. That's what the anxiety is actually trying to help us realize, is that something is off. We're kind of traveling down the wrong path. So I'm going to start with this idea of physical or false. I don't like calling it false, to be honest, because it's still anxiety and stress. But I want to talk to us about kind of low-hanging fruit and how to prevent these things without delving into the sort of deeper life meaning things at the minute. So cortisol, I'm sure many of you have heard about hormonal imbalances or cortisol and cortisol. And very often, people will come to me because their cortisol levels are through the roof. And confusingly, what cortisol will do is it's like your energy fuel. So your adrenal glands in this picture, you can see your adrenal glands are two little like triangular glands that sit on top of your kidneys. They are what produce the cortisol. And cortisol is what gets us going. So it gets us up in the morning, it gets us able to function and to move. And our cortisol should spike, as far as I'm aware, in and around 9 a.m. So really it kind of gradually builds from about 6 a.m. to get us awake, alive and moving. Very often people will find they're the most productive in those morning hours. That's your cortisol. The issue is, and this is something that I test for in session with people, whenever we test the adrenal glands, very often those muscles are so weak. And that's usually giving us an indicator that there's not enough energy coming from these adrenal glands. In other words, they've sort of flatlined. So very often what will happen is people have been producing cortisol for such a long time, chronically, that we flatline. Our adrenal glands basically are like, I'm done. I can't do anymore. So I'm curious, or I want people to get curious about if you feel like you have flatlined. So if your energy is seriously low and you literally are just like, I can't get out of bed in the morning, and I'm dragging myself along through the day. Think back to last year, think back to pre-Christmas, think back to even January or February. Was that a particularly high stress month or year for you? Was there issues with relationships? Perhaps there was grief in your family, job changes, job loss, sickness, children's sickness too. All of these things that put us into this crazy high cortisol state where our body it doesn't drop, it stays up there. That's when the adrenal glands get really, really tired. So cortisol is going to be a big factor in stress and anxiety. And really, what gets the adrenal glands going and the cortisol kind of spiking, we need it. It should spike, but it should fall. The issue is whenever we don't go down again, we just stay up there. So things that I find in clients that keep cortisol really high, a big one, sadly, is caffeine. So caffeine will spike your cortisol, but if you are like a chronic caffeine, coffee, tea drinker, that's when there's issues because you're almost like squeezing your adrenals every single time you have that like hit of caffeine or tea to get you through. Another thing that will kind of over exercise your adrenal glands and the cortisol would be, I think, if whenever you're a menstruating woman, having the same type of like high intensity workout every single day or every single phase through your cycle. So that might be okay in some phases of your menstrual cycle, but really when your body is asking for cortisol to be lower and progesterone to be higher, that's when the HIIT workout and the like high sweaty stuff is going to be a wee bit too much for your adrenal glands and your stress and possibly anxiety levels as well. Other things would include long-term fasting. So whenever we fast, our body produces more cortisol in place of the fuel. So if we're not getting fuel from our food, it's like, right, how are we going to get this energy? Let's use our cortisol because it gives us, it spikes our blood sugar, the cortisol alone, and it gives us that feel good kind of energetic feeling. The issue again with the female body is that in order for our hormones to act kind of normally and nicely balanced, our bodies need to feel safe. And it's okay, again, if we don't feel safe all the time, that's normal. But generally speaking, if you are pumping your cortisol all of the time, you're in fight or flight all of the time, hormones that are meant to be the kind of master hormone that should be producing your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone, a lot of that will basically get stolen. So it produces cortisol because your body's like, well, she hasn't eaten in 4 hours and we got up at 6, 7. So let's not worry too much about progesterone and estrogen. Let's go straight to cortisol. Let's make more cortisol to get her through the day. So fasting comes up a lot. I do feel strongly about it, but I appreciate that there's nuances as well, and there's a lot of great benefits to fasting too. My advice for women that I work with is if you want to fast, have an early dinner and have your breakfast. So go earlier in the day, like have your dinner early evening and fast right through, but please have breakfast because your body is so sensitive and it really needs to feel nourished and safe in the morning. Anyway, we're going to move on from this slide. Okay, so step one, as I say, we want to rule out physical anxiety and stress. So the main things, and I touched on these already, but the main things really here are reducing cortisol whenever it's not meant to spike, like allowing the natural flow of cortisol rather than us pumping out the cortisol first thing. So a big thing that our body needs and our hormones need to function optimally is the correct light signals during the day. And one way we can really disrupt our light signals is by scrolling on our phone in bed. So if you can imagine, your body wants gradual sunlight signals in the morning to know, oh, okay, it is 7 a.m. Now it's 8. Now it's 9. Now it's 10. So at every hour, different types of hormones are going to be made in to kind of build up to this perfect balance. If we whack in a phone in our face in bed, the amount of blue light that's coming from your device basically tells your body that it's 12 o'clock noon or that it's noon, solar noon. Solar noon is like the brightest part of the day. It's whenever blue light is the highest. And our phones kind of emanate that. So if you can imagine the panic that ensues whenever you're on your phone, either in bed or you've just got out of bed and you're checking your emails or WhatsApps or whatever, your body goes into this panic of, oh my gosh, we have slept in and it's solar noon, it's 12 noon, let's get cortisol going, let's get everything ramped up. And while that might feel okay short term, over the weeks and the months, that is going to be a massive factor into why we feel stressed and anxious because our body is like trying to catch up. So my best tip with that would be try and avoid your phone for the first half an hour if you can, would be amazing. And if you have to look at it in the morning, turn your red light filter on. So that cuts out a lot of blue light. In the morning, open your window, go downstairs. If you're drinking your like herbal tea or anything like that, hot water and lemon, open the windows and just try and get those light signals into your eyes. The next one we've talked on, caffeine, especially on an empty stomach. So caffeine or coffee, delicious. I love I really like it as well. But I will never have it on an empty stomach. Again, it's almost like if we haven't had that food, that breakfast to kind of ground us in the morning, going straight in with caffeine is really going to spike our cortisol earlier and more drastically than we want it, which again, over time, I see people come in and they feel stressed or they feel anxious or overwhelmed, but their morning routine is like coffee, maybe two coffees or coffee tea, and then they'll have like a late breakfast. So ideally what I would recommend is within an hour of waking, get in a good breakfast and then have your coffee afterwards, or have it with lunch. But yeah, I mean it's kind of mainstream information now, but having caffeine earlier in the day as opposed to after lunch is going to be better for then your sleep cycle that night. Breakfast, really important in my books in terms of helping women with hormone balance. I'm going to suggest that you prioritize protein and some fats alongside your carbohydrates. So again, it's so common, people will come in and whenever they talk about their breakfast, it's usually a bowl of cereal or porridge with fruit. And again, while porridge and fruit are not bad breakfasts, they're really lacking in a blood sugar stabilizing protein or fat. So options that I would do with protein, with porridge rather, would be crack an egg in it when you're cooking it, crack an egg, and it makes it a wee bit more creamy. I promise you won't taste the egg. Don't put two eggs in it because I've tried it and it does taste eggy. But one egg to sort of thicken your porridge is nice, and you're adding in a little bit of protein and some fat. Or alternatively, have a protein shake and then your porridge if you're really set on porridge. I know people that put a protein powder into their porridge. Or if you really want to try it out, then go for like an egg-based breakfast. So omelette with some cheese and ham in it, or eggs, avocado toast, or you decide. But really leftover, something chickeny, something hammy, cheesy, yogurty, any of those nice proteins are going to be so good. And you will notice, I would say within the week, if you're a real porridge or cereal eater or toast on its own eater, you'll notice the week in your anxiety and in your stress levels, I would say within a week's time when you change your breakfast. Fresh air before noon might be a luxury for some people, and I get that. So even if you're cracking your window, again, it's getting light signals and fresh air into your body. I feel like that really helps just like chill your nervous system out. And allow yourself a window of slow time before and after work. So ideally, you're doing these morning routines with maybe a little bit of like nice, relaxing music, or you're just listening to the birds outside with the window open. Again, I appreciate that many of you will be like trying to get socks on children's feet and like getting kids to eat their breakfast. So slow time before and after work might not be possible. But I remember hearing a really interesting piece of, I don't know if it was research or I'm not sure, but they talked about the impact that having even 5 minutes of like sitting on a sofa after your day's work when you come home, the impact that that will have on the rest of your evening and just general tiredness, rather than going straight from home like into the run to go to swimming or sports training or straight away cooking dinner. Like if you can just pause for 5 minutes and just allow yourself to kind of be like, right, I am home now, and really grind into that, that is said to make a massive difference, which I find it is hard, but that's why we're learning this now. So that's step one. That would be where I start with everybody. So regardless of whether there has been something really traumatic or really stressful that's been going on for them in the last few months or years, even alongside that emotional work that we do, I'm still going to be working on these physical kind of stabilizers. This should keep you really calm if you're doing most of those things. So the next one, I hope you'll find really cool. This is where the kinesiology comes in a little bit more. So what I want you to do now is just to kind of scan over these things and pick out any symptoms that you notice that pertain to you. So really what we're doing here is almost using our body as a map to understand the roots to stressors and anxiety, stress and anxiety. So very often people will come in and yeah, bloating is a big thing for them, or heartburn, or really irregular bowel movements. So it's too loose, or it's looser than what they want, or it takes a few days actually for them to pass something. In a session, what we're doing is testing the muscles to find out where the imbalances are in terms of the organ systems. And then I'm going to look at, okay, well, what emotions are connected to these organ systems? And is that what's kind of adding to your stress or anxiety? So for some of you, I know you've worked with me before, you can maybe pick out things that came up in your session. But let's take an example. So adrenals, since we're talking about like real tiredness sometimes or overstimulation like anxiety. With the adrenal muscles, sorry, the adrenal muscle indicators are the sartorius muscles. So they're like big muscles that wrap around from your hip and wrap all the way around the front and down into your knee. Whenever I'm testing the adrenals, I'm asking people to basically to hold their ankles up while I try and pull down. Now, perhaps they've had like physical trauma or like bangs to that muscle, and that's what's switching it off. But if I also notice that they're tired and wired people, i.e., they're exhausted, but when it hits like 10 or 11 p.m., they just can't sleep or they're lying in bed wide awake. That's usually a good indicator that there's a tiredness piece going on there. If they feel, or if I feel like their energy is just like they're panicked, it's like can't relax. It takes them a while to kind of get into the session to let their body chill or constantly exhausted. Then I want to know whenever we delve into the emotion connected to the adrenals, have they been living life that really lacks joy? And for people, sometimes they find that, God, whenever this happened, or even as much as, they love their children, of course, whenever they move into that motherhood phase of their life, because so much of their energy is going elsewhere, joy has almost like come out of it a little bit, or things that they used to enjoy for themselves, they just don't do anymore. So it's always interesting to see, okay, do you really crave more joy? Are you lacking joy? And how is that contributing to this feeling of like, I'm so tired because I'm living on a hamster wheel? It's like work, prep dinner, eat, sleep, repeat. Does life just feel like kind of lackluster? And how is that affecting your adrenal glands? So that's just an example, but yeah, I'm so curious. Has anybody noticed anything? If you've got chronic chest infections, breathlessness, lung issues, has there been any sort of grief or big changes in your life? It doesn't have to be death as such. It could be death of parts of your life that you once used to have or that you miss. Stomach is a big one. I see that in children all the time. So kids that are like complaining that their tummy is sore a lot. And then when we look into it, they're like very empathetic children. So they're very tuned into how are my parents feeling? How are my best friends at school feeling? Do people like me? Am I accepted? That's like a real strong empathy character, but to their detriment sometimes because life's hard and sometimes their wee tummy just kind of takes the brunt of all that over empathy energy. Um, Yeah, so really what I'm doing here is once we've kind of gone down your main reducing anxiety and stress with the physical factors, I'm also looking at what is your body telling us and what sort of emotional energy could be trapped or stuck or stagnant in the body, that's then also leading to this like overwhelm, anxiousness, and stress. And then whenever we're able to locate that in a session and release it through the lymphatic work, through the Bach flower remedies, which are like emotional medicine, and really like bring all that energy up and help clear it. It's amazing your symptoms, how they can start to ease. And again, the stress and anxiety starts to reduces. I had somebody in today, just my last session there, and she was talking about just feeling lighter and friends noticing that her whole energy has changed. And it's little by little, but it's amazing what body work can do with our mental stuff. Okay, so in terms of what do you actually do about this? What time is it? Let me see. I don't even know what time it is. Sorry, everybody. I just want to run on. 8 o'clock. Okay,
It's just on
so
8.
thank you. Yeah, the wee timer. I'm realizing that now. Thanks for shouting that out. So, in terms of what do we actually do about this? Yes, of course, getting body work done or working through those deeper emotions with somebody like a kinesiologist or with another um, practitioner that works with the body and works with your emotions, that is, of course, a privilege. And if you're able to do that, then I would encourage you to do that. But other things that you can actually do at home, the physical things that we talked about, step one, you can do that at home on your own or with support. But here are also things that I really like. So whenever I think about how do we ground the nervous system and really reduce stress and anxiety in like a step-by-step way, think about your senses. So think about the things that you can hear that basically take you out of your mind and really ground into that sound. So things like playing music in your kitchen, earphone music. So enjoying putting your earphones in, lying in your bed, dancing in your room. Spa music, I love. An audiobook. Again, I would sort of be like more well, yeah, any audiobook. Who am I to say what you listen to? Chats on the sofa with friends or family that's like soothing people, not like people that make you feel anxious. And FaceTime calls, again, like choose the energy of the person that is actually going to be helpful. In terms of sight, I was sort of thinking like I feel like if we can tap into things that used to calm us as children, that's really helpful. So childhood movies, nature documentaries are really soothing, nature walks, nature in general will soothe our nervous system quite easily, which is great. And fiction books. I love non-fiction, but I know if I really want to like force myself to like stop thinking about work and calm down, then fiction books is really helpful for that. Smell, oil diffusers, essential oils are lovely for just taking us out of our mind and bringing us into our senses. Baking things, we have to do it with our hands, so that's great. Cooking something new. In terms of taste, so what I am testing people for or recommending people to consume whenever they're adrenally fatigued, so whenever they're kind of on edge or extremely exhausted, sea salt is amazing. So I would sprinkle that over most meals. Citrus fruits for vitamin C, starchy veg like pumpkin, squash is great for getting loads of minerals, as is red meat for B vitamins, amazing. Seafood, loads of minerals. Seaweed, loads of minerals. The sea, as you can tell, is very mineral rich. So sea salt, seafood, and seaweed is class. Adrenal elixir is like a mocktail that's really nice. I would recommend that once or twice for people who are really tired. Touch, I feel like, is the main one that people know about, but it's not the only one. So touch, hugs, like physical contact can be really soothing for our nervous system. Playing with pets, being barefoot in your house, if your house is warm enough, but even in socks, or grounding yourself on sand or grass. I love doing that. Then thinking about hot and cold. So you're almost like shocking your system into being in your body and not feeling anxious or stressed or on your mental hamster wheel. So a foot bath with magnesium salts, a hot shower, a bath, sauna. In terms of cold, we've got sea dips, cold showers, and then trampoline for like lymphatic, kind of moving the lymph around the body, just shaking things out. So trampoline and lymph are more like shaking. Um, so yeah, in summary, step one is like go to the foundations first. Everything that we've talked about to kind of rule out if this anxiety or this stress is coming from like a lack of breakfast, cortisol levels being chronically too high, the light signals being very artificial, too much caffeine, work with that first. Step two is then working with someone or even just noticing your own symptoms and your own emotions in the body. Is there like a fear piece going on? Am I scared about something to come? Am I struggling to process something that's then causing this like anxious, stressful energy in my body? And then step three are like the senses toolbox that we just talked about. And your adrenal elixir recipe. So if you want to take a picture of that or a screenshot, that is what I take and that's what I recommend for my clients as well. Again, lemon or lime juice to get the vitamin C in, half a teaspoon of sea salt for sodium, half a teaspoon of cream of tartar, which you'll get in like the baking aisles in shops, or coconut water. Both of those are your like potassium sources. And then just to make it feel fancy, some sparkling water or still water. You could put lime in, always tastes good. Um, but those are the minerals that are going to really help like rejuvenate your adrenals if you are really, really tired. So I'm just going to stop recording now.